The ship of Rami moved slowly across the dark sky of the unknown world. His small vessel shook as it passed through heavy clouds. He held the controls tightly and whispered to himself that he must not fail. His colony far away was running out of power. The rare crystals on this world were the only hope for survival. If he returned empty-handed, hundreds of families would face darkness and hunger. The ship landed in a valley filled with tall black rocks. Strange plants glowed with pale light, and the air was heavy with mist. Rami stepped outside wearing his breathing mask. The ground cracked beneath his boots as if the world itself was alive. He turned on his scanner and followed the signal of the crystals. It led him through a narrow path between cliffs. After hours of walking, Rami found something he did not expect. At the end of the path stood a massive wall shining with silver light. Towers rose into the mist, guarded by giant statues of alien warriors. The scanner showed a strong energy reading beyond the wall. The crystals he needed were inside this forbidden place. Rami's heart beat fast. He had heard whispers from old star maps that this land belonged to a powerful queen. Few had ever returned after crossing her borders. But he had no choice. He placed his hand on the wall. The stone felt warm, as if it knew he was there. Then, without warning, a hidden door opened, and a path invited him inside. He walked carefully, keeping his hand close to the small plasma tool on his belt. The inside of the palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Halls of crystal stretched endlessly, glowing softly with blue fire. Strange paintings told stories of battles, kings, and finally the rise of a queen who stood above all. Her eyes in the paintings seemed to follow him. Rami kept moving forward until he entered a grand chamber. At its center stood a throne carved from living crystal. Around it, alien guards in silver armor turned their eyes toward him. Before he could react, they lifted their weapons. Rami froze. He could fight 1 or 2, but not 20 at once. Then the sound of soft footsteps echoed through the chamber. Every guard lowered their head. Rami raised his eyes and saw her. The alien queen walked down the crystal steps with grace. Her robes flowed like liquid silver, and her crown seemed to shine with its own light. Her eyes were sharp, filled with strength and mystery. The guards prepared to strike Rami down, but the queen raised her hand. At once, silence filled the chamber. The weapons lowered. The queen stood before him, tall and calm, but her voice carried the weight of power. "Who dares walk into my sacred palace?" she said. "No human has crossed these halls for 1,000 cycles." Rami breathed slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "My name is Rami. I come not to harm but to seek. My people are dying. We need the crystals that rest beneath your land. Without them, our colony will fall." The queen's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, circling him like a predator studying prey. "Humans always come with sweet words. They speak of need, but their hands take more than they deserve. Why should I spare you when I could end you here?" The guards shifted, waiting for her command. Rami kept his ground. "I do not beg for myself. I beg for the children who will not see tomorrow if I return empty-handed. Take my life if you must, but let me bring back what they need." For a moment, the queen said nothing. Her gaze locked on him, and the hall grew colder. Then she lifted her hand again, slowly, with elegance. The movement silenced the guards once more. She leaned forward, her voice lowering into a whisper that reached only him. "Dare to touch me again, human, and you will regret it." Rami did not understand at first. He had touched the wall, the living gate that belonged to her. By opening it, he had already broken her most sacred rule. Yet she had not ordered his death. Instead, she tested him with words. Rami bowed his head slightly, but he did not kneel. I do not seek to offend. I only seek hope. If I crossed a line, it was because I had no other path. The queen studied him with unreadable eyes. For the first time, something softer flickered within them. It was not mercy, but curiosity. She turned to her court. Take him to the inner halls. He will be questioned further. Until then, he remains alive. The guards obeyed. They surrounded Rami, but their spears did not strike. Instead, they guided him through another passage lit with strange blue flames. As he walked, Rami's mind raced. He had seen the queen's power, her command over life and death. Yet she had spared him, at least for now. Why? Was it chance, or was there something in his words that touched her? He remembered the whisper again. Dare to touch me again, human. It was both a warning and a challenge. Rami did not know what fate awaited him, but he felt certain of one thing. His journey had only begun, and the guards led Rami through winding passages of the palace. The walls glowed with faint blue light, casting long shadows. He felt the eyes of every soldier on his back. Their steps were heavy, their armor shining like polished stone. Though they carried long spears and strange weapons, none spoke a word. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of boots striking the crystal floor. They brought him to a smaller chamber where the air felt warmer. The ceiling was high, shaped like an open flower, and the walls were covered with moving patterns of light that looked like rivers flowing upward. At the center stood a single platform surrounded by glowing chains. The guards gestured for Rami to step onto it. He obeyed, knowing that resistance would end in death. The moment his boots touched the platform, the chains rose and formed a circle of light around him. He was not bound, but he knew he could not pass through without pain. The guards left, and the doors closed. For a while, Rami stood alone, his heart beating hard. Then the sound of footsteps returned. He looked up and saw the queen enter, her robes flowing like silver water. Two guards followed behind her but kept their distance. The queen stepped closer and stopped at the edge of the glowing circle. Her eyes locked on Rami. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her voice echoed through the chamber. Tell me again why you are here. Speak carefully, human, for every word will decide your fate. Rami straightened his shoulders. My people live far away on a colony starved of power. Our farms wither, our machines break, and our children grow weak. The crystals in your land are the only hope we have. I came to find them, not to steal, but to save lives. The queen's expression did not change. She studied him as if weighing his soul. Then she tilted her head slightly, her crown catching the light. Do you think I believe such words so easily? Humans always come to take. They dress their greed in noble tales. You speak of children, but I have seen the worlds your kind leave behind. Dust and silence. Her words cut sharp, but Rami did not lower his eyes. I cannot speak for all humans. Many may be guilty of what you say. But I can speak for myself. I came because I had no choice. I will not lie. If I return with nothing, my people will suffer. The queen's gaze grew colder. She raised her hand, the same motion that had silenced her guards before. The light of the chamber dimmed as if the walls themselves obeyed her will. Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper, yet heavy with power. Dare to touch me again, human, and you will regret it. The words struck him like a blade. She had not forgotten. When he touched the living gate outside, he had broken her law. That act alone could have ended his life. Yet she kept him alive, to test him perhaps, or to play with his fate. Rami's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak. I understand your warning. But if my hand reached where it should not, it was only because I had no path left. The gate opened to me. I did not force it. Perhaps your land itself wished me to enter. At this, the queen's eyes flickered with something unreadable. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she stepped closer, her figure shining against the blue light. You claim my land welcomed you. That is bold, human. Do you know what happens to those who claim favor from what is sacred? Their voices are buried under stone. Their bones feed the roots of the world. Rami's chest tightened, but he did not step back. If that is my fate, then I will face it. But I would rather face death with truth than live with lies. The queen stared at him for a long moment. Her lips pressed into a thin line, as if she expected fear but saw something different. Slowly, she lowered her hand. The light in the chamber returned to normal. You are strange, she said. Strange for a human, and strange even for a prisoner. Most who stand before me beg, cry, or lie. You do none of these. Why? Rami took a breath. Because I have nothing left to lose except the chance to save my people. My fear is not for myself, but for them. If I must be judged, then let me be judged for that. The queen turned away, her robe flowing behind her like liquid silver. She walked a few steps, then stopped and looked back. Her voice carried both warning and curiosity. You speak of honor and survival. Perhaps you believe your words. But know this, human. One step too far, one false move, and your life will end without hesitation. She motioned to the guards. They stepped forward but did not enter the circle. The chains of light lowered, and Rami felt the weight of freedom return, though guarded closely. Take him, the queen said. He is not yet free, nor is he condemned. He will face a trial. If he survives, perhaps his words carry truth. If he fails, then his life will be nothing more than a whisper lost in my halls. The guards moved around Rami, guiding him out of the chamber. As he walked, he thought about her words. She had spared him again. Twice now she could have ended his life, yet she had chosen not to. The queen remained behind, watching him leave. In her eyes burned a conflict she did not speak. Humans had always been enemies, yet this one did not act like the rest. He carried himself with stubborn strength, even when faced with death. She raised her hand once more, staring at it in silence. Strange human, she whispered to herself. Why do you not kneel? Rami did not hear her words, but in his heart, he felt the weight of what was to come. A trial awaited him, and with it, the chance to prove himself or perish. The guards led Rami deeper into the palace. The halls grew darker as they walked, and the light from the walls flickered like fading fire. The sound of their steps echoed loudly. Rami kept his head high, but inside his chest his heart beat fast. He knew a trial awaited him, though he did not yet know what form it would take. They reached a massive door shaped like an arch of stone. Strange markings glowed across it, and a low hum filled the air. The guards pushed it open. Inside stretched a vast chamber with walls so high they disappeared into shadows. At the center of the floor was a wide circle carved into the ground. The queen stood on a raised platform above the circle. Her silver robe shimmered in the dim light. Around her gathered dozens of nobles and soldiers, all watching silently. The air felt heavy, like the weight of judgment itself. The queen raised her hand, and the room fell completely silent. Her voice echoed strong and clear. This human claims he comes not to steal but to save. He speaks of honor, yet honor is not proved with words. It is proved with trials. Today he shall walk the maze of shifting paths. If he survives, he may speak again. If he fails, his body will be left where it falls. The nobles nodded. The guards pushed Rami toward the circle. The ground shook. Slowly, the floor opened, revealing a staircase leading downward into darkness. Rami stepped forward without hesitation. He knew fear could not show on his face. The queen watched him closely. She expected trembling or hesitation, but instead she saw steady steps. A faint spark of curiosity burned in her eyes as he vanished below. The stairs ended in a wide tunnel lit by glowing stones. Ahead stretched a long passage that split into many paths. The walls shifted, sliding like living creatures. Every time Rami blinked, the paths changed, closing and opening in strange patterns. He took a breath and spoke softly to himself. One path forward. No turning back. The first passage was narrow and twisted. As he walked, the walls moved closer, pressing around him. He pushed forward, forcing his body through the tight space until he stumbled into a wider chamber. Here the floor was covered with tiles that glowed red and blue. The moment his boot touched a red tile, the ground trembled, and spikes shot up. He leaped aside just in time, landing on a blue tile. The spikes retreated. He understood quickly. Blue was safe. Red was death. Carefully, step by step, he crossed the chamber. Sweat dripped down his face, and his breath came hard. Yet he kept his focus, moving with patience until he reached the other side. The next passage led into darkness. No light guided his steps. He placed his hand on the wall and walked slowly. Strange sounds echoed around him, whispers, growls, and the scrape of claws. His mind warned him of danger, but he pressed forward. Suddenly, something leaped from the shadows. It was a creature unlike any he had seen, tall, thin, with glowing eyes and claws like blades. It hissed and lunged. Rami rolled aside, drawing his small plasma tool from his belt. The light of the tool burned bright, and the creature hissed louder, shrinking back from the glow. Rami swung it forward, forcing the beast to retreat. Step by step, he pushed it back until it slipped into the shadows. He kept walking, never lowering the tool until he saw faint blue light ahead. He entered another chamber. This one was filled with floating platforms over a deep pit. The platforms moved slowly, shifting positions like pieces of a puzzle. Rami took a deep breath and jumped to the first one. It shook under his weight. He waited, timed the movement, and leaped to the next. One by one he crossed, though twice he nearly slipped. At the last jump, the platform moved too quickly, and his foot missed. He grabbed the edge with his hands, his body hanging over the endless pit. His arms screamed with pain, but he pulled himself up with all his strength. He lay on the platform, gasping for breath, then pushed forward. Finally, he reached a tall door of crystal. It glowed bright, almost blinding. He touched it, and it opened with a soft sound. Beyond lay the exit, a stairway leading upward. When Rami stepped out, he found himself once again in the grand chamber above. The queen and her court were waiting. The nobles whispered in shock, for few had ever passed the maze. The queen studied him closely. Her eyes were sharp, yet there was something new in them. She raised her hand, silencing the whispers. "You survived," she said. "The maze has claimed many lives, yet you walked through its shadows and traps. Tell me, human. Why did you not give up when death waited at every step? Rami stood tall, his chest still rising and falling with heavy breaths. Because I could not. If I fall, my people fall with me. Fear cannot stop me. Pain cannot stop me. Only death can stop me, and even then, my struggle will mean I tried. The chamber grew silent again. The nobles looked at one another, surprised by his words. The queen narrowed her eyes, but her voice was softer than before. You refuse to kneel. You refuse to break. Pride runs deep in you. Yet pride alone does not make strength. Tell me, human, are you proud, or are you desperate? Rami met her gaze without flinching. I am both. Desperate for my people, proud enough not to betray them. If that is weakness, then let it be mine. The queen turned slowly, her robe swirling like flowing silver. She raised her hand, addressing her court. The human has survived the maze. He has spoken without fear. For now, he lives. But his test is not over. His presence will remain under my watch. The guards lowered their weapons. Some nobles frowned, unhappy with her choice. Others looked at Rami with new respect. The queen's eyes returned to him once more. For the first time, there was no coldness in them, only thought, deep and sharp. You are not what I expected, human, she said quietly. But your path here has only begun. Rami stood silent, but inside he felt the weight of her words. He had faced the maze and survived. Yet he knew his struggle was far from finished. Above him, the queen raised her hand again, a sign of command and power. Around them, the court bowed. Rami did not bow, and the queen did not demand it. Their clash of pride had only begun, and the future hung in the space between their gazes. The night on the alien world was never truly dark. The palace walls glowed faint blue, and the towers shone with silver fire. Yet an uneasy silence spread through the halls. Rami sat in a small chamber given to him after his trial. 2 guards stood outside, watching him like hawks. He could not sleep. His body still ached from the maze, but his mind refused to rest. He thought of his colony far away. He imagined the faces of children waiting for light, farmers praying for power to keep their crops alive. His people's lives balanced on a thread, and that thread now hung inside the will of the alien queen. Suddenly, the ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The guards outside shouted, their voices sharp with alarm. Rami jumped to his feet. The walls trembled again, this time harder. Then came the sound of horns, long and loud, echoing across the palace. The door opened, and 1 guard rushed in. Stay inside, he ordered, but before he could say more, an explosion shook the chamber. Part of the wall cracked, and fire burst through. The guard grabbed Rami's arm and pulled him into the hallway. The palace was chaos. Flames spread across the walls, and soldiers ran in every direction. The clash of steel and the hiss of energy weapons filled the air. Rami looked around and saw warriors in black armor storming the halls. Their faces were hidden behind masks, their banners marked with a red symbol of fire. They are the rebels, the guard shouted. They seek the queen. Without thinking, Rami ran with the guard toward the throne chamber. He knew his place was not here, yet something inside him refused to turn away. The queen had spared him twice. Whatever her reasons, he could not let her be taken by enemies. They reached the grand hall. The great doors stood open, smoke spilling out. Inside, the queen's soldiers fought fiercely, but the enemy pushed forward with wave after wave. At the far end of the chamber, the queen stood upon her platform, calm yet fierce, her hand raised as she gave commands. Her guards surrounded her, but they were outnumbered. The rebels pressed closer, shouting with victory. One of them threw a blazing spear of energy that shattered the floor near the queen's feet. She did not move, but her eyes narrowed with fire. Rami rushed in. He grabbed a fallen spear from the ground. The weapon felt heavy, but he held it firm. A rebel soldier lunged toward the queen. Rami moved without thought, swinging the spear hard. It struck the rebel's chest, and the warrior fell back. The queen's eyes widened for an instant. She had not expected the human prisoner to stand at her side. Rami placed himself between her and the attackers, his body tense, his breath sharp. "Stay behind me," he said quickly. The queen almost laughed at the absurdity, but the fire in his eyes silenced her. She raised her hand again, and her soldiers rallied. Together with Rami, they pushed against the rebels. The battle raged. Rami fought with all the strength he had. He had no training with alien weapons, yet his hands moved with desperate speed. He blocked a strike, spun, and struck back. Each time he thought he would fall, he forced himself to keep going, thinking of his people. The queen herself joined the fight. With each raise of her hand, crystal shards rose from the floor and flew toward the rebels, piercing their armor. Her voice commanded like thunder, and her soldiers obeyed without question. Still, the rebels were many. The chamber shook with the clash of battle. Fire burned across the walls, and smoke filled the air. Rami's body grew heavy, his arms numb, but he refused to step back. At last, the tide began to turn. The queen's soldiers formed a shield wall, driving the rebels toward the doors. Rami struck one last warrior, sending him crashing into his allies. Then the horns sounded again, this time a retreat. The rebels fell back, dragging their wounded with them. Within minutes, the hall was empty except for smoke and broken stone. The queen lowered her hand. The crystal shards fell to the ground, silent once more. Her soldiers stood breathing hard, their armor scorched. The hall smelled of fire and sweat. Rami dropped the spear. His chest rose and fell heavily. His arms shook with exhaustion. He had not fought for glory, only survival. Yet he had stood, and he had not run. The queen stepped forward. Her silver robe was torn at the edge, her crown tilted, but her presence remained strong. She looked at Rami, her eyes sharp, her voice steady. "You could have escaped," she said. "The rebels gave you the chance. Yet you fought here, at my side. Why?" Rami met her gaze, though his legs trembled. "Because I could not leave you to fall. If your enemies take you, this world will burn. And if it burns, so will any chance of my people's survival. I do not fight for you alone. I fight for all who still live." The queen studied him silently. Around them, her court whispered. Many stared at the human with new eyes, surprised by his courage. Finally, the queen spoke. "You are reckless. You are untrained. Yet in the heat of battle, you did not falter. Perhaps you are more than I thought." Rami gave a tired smile. "Perhaps I am only stubborn." For the first time, the queen's lips curved faintly. It was not a smile, but it was not cold either. She raised her hand, silencing the whispers of her court. "This human has fought at my side," she declared. "From this day, he is not a mere prisoner. He remains under my watch, but his courage shall be recognized." The hall filled with murmurs. Some nobles frowned, but none dared challenge her. The guards lowered their weapons and bowed. The queen turned back to Rami. Her eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now held something else, a quiet respect. "Rest now, human," she said softly. "The trial you face is not over. But you have taken your first step into my world." Rami nodded, too tired to answer. He knew the battle had only begun, both inside the palace and within the queen's judgment. Yet as he looked at her, he felt certain of one thing. For the first time since landing on this strange world, he was not completely alone. The palace was quiet after the attack. The broken stones were cleared, the fires put out, and the wounded carried to rest. Yet the silence felt heavy, like a shadow that would not leave. The rebels had been pushed back, but all knew they would return. Rami sat in a small garden inside the palace. Strange flowers glowed softly around him, their petals opening and closing as if breathing. He leaned back against the wall, his body still aching from the battle. His arms bore fresh scars from the spears, and his chest carried the weight of exhaustion. Still, his mind was not on the pain. It was on the queen. He remembered how she stood strong in the fight, her hand raised as if the palace itself obeyed her will. She was fierce and proud, yet also calm. When she looked at him after the battle, her eyes carried something he had not seen before, not just suspicion, but respect. The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. It was the queen herself, walking slowly into the garden. Her robe had been changed, now whole again, shining silver in the pale light. She stopped before him, her eyes steady. "You should rest," she said. "Your body is not used to such battles." Rami stood, though his legs ached. "I will rest when I can. But I wish to thank you. You could have left me to die, yet you fought beside me." The queen tilted her head slightly. "I could ask the same of you. You could have run, yet you chose to stay." He nodded. "Because survival means nothing if I abandon those who stand with me." Her gaze lingered on him, sharp yet thoughtful. "You speak as though we are allies. Yet do not forget, human, you are still not free." "I have not forgotten," Rami said quietly. "But I will not stand idle when danger comes. Whether prisoner or ally, I fight for life." The queen did not answer right away. Instead, she turned and looked at the glowing flowers. For a moment, her expression softened, as though a memory touched her. Then she spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "My council does not trust you. They say you fight only to win my favor, that you plan to betray me once you are free." Rami's jaw tightened. "And what do you say?" She turned back, her eyes locking with his. "I say I do not know. You are different from the humans I have known, but difference does not always mean trust." He took a step closer. "Then let my actions prove me. Not my words, not promises. Let what I do speak for me." Before she could answer, voices came from the shadows. 3 nobles entered the garden, their robes dark, their eyes sharp. They bowed slightly to the queen but ignored Rami. "My queen," one of them said, "we beg you to reconsider. This human is dangerous. He stands proud when he should kneel. He speaks boldly when he should remain silent. Such pride will bring ruin." Another added, "He has already broken your law by touching the sacred gate. He has walked where no human should. And now he stands at your side in battle as if he were one of us. This is dangerous. You must end it before it spreads doubt among your people." The queen raised her hand, silencing them. "He has fought for us when others fled. He has shown courage where fear should rule. Should I punish loyalty?" The nobles exchanged uneasy looks. One stepped forward. Courage can be a mask, Majesty. Humans are clever. They use words and deeds to hide their true hunger. If you open your hand to him, he will take your throne piece by piece. Rami listened without anger. Instead, he spoke calmly. I do not want a throne. I do not want power. All I want is enough crystals to save my colony. That is all. The nobles glared at him, but the queen studied his face. She searched for lies but found none. Still, her duty weighed heavy. When the nobles left, the queen turned back to him. Her voice was quieter, almost heavy. You see the truth now. My people do not accept you. They never will. If I show trust in you, they will say I am weak. If I cast you out, I betray my own judgment. Do you understand the weight this puts on me? Rami nodded. I do. Leadership is never easy. But I cannot change who I am. I can only choose to stand true to my word. The queen stepped closer, her eyes fierce. And if your word is not enough? If your presence alone tears my court apart, what then? Rami did not flinch. Then I will prove myself again, as many times as needed. I will not run from their doubt. Let them test me. Let them hate me. But I will not break my word. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. The queen's eyes softened slightly, though her voice remained strong. You are stubborn, human. Stubborn enough to fight a battle you cannot win. But perhaps that is why you survived the maze. Perhaps that is why you stood in the hall when the rebels came. She turned away, her robe whispering across the stone. Rest now. Tomorrow the council meets, and they will demand a decision about you. Be ready, for their voices are sharp, and they will not spare you. Rami bowed his head slightly, though not in weakness, but in respect. I will be ready. The queen left the garden, leaving him alone with the glowing flowers. He sat once more, his body heavy with weariness. Yet his mind burned with thought. He had earned the queen's respect, but her people saw him as danger. He knew what this meant. His fight was no longer just for crystals. It was for trust, for honor, for the chance to prove that humans could be more than enemies. As the night stretched on, Rami watched the glowing petals close, and he whispered softly to himself, I will not fail. The council chamber was full. Tall pillars rose around the circle, carved with marks of old victories. Firelight burned in silver bowls, throwing sharp shadows on the walls. The nobles sat in their places, their robes white and bright, their voices sharp as steel. At the center stood the queen, tall and calm, her crown shining faintly in the firelight. Beside her, Rami waited. His heart beat hard, but his face was steady. He had fought storms before. This was not with blades, but with words. One noble rose first. Majesty, the human must be removed. His presence is a seed of danger. Already whispers spread through the streets. People say you give him honor that belongs to your warriors. Another joined. He stood in battle, yes. But many stood in battle. Does a single sword make him one of us? No. He is a stranger, and strangers bring ruin. The voices grew louder. They clashed like waves against the queen's calm. Some spoke with fear, some with anger, and a few with envy. Yet through it all, she did not break her stillness. At last she raised her hand, and silence fell. Her eyes swept the chamber. You call him danger. You call him stranger. Yet when the rebels came, who stood at my side? Who lifted his hand when others fled? You question his right to stand here, but none can question his courage. The nobles shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, but others held their ground. Then the queen turned to Rami. "Speak now. Let them hear your voice." Rami stepped forward. He looked at the nobles, their eyes sharp and cold. He drew a breath. "I am not here to steal, nor to rule. I came seeking crystals to save my people. That is the truth. Yet when your walls were struck, I did not hide. I fought, because I believe life is worth protecting. Not just human life, not just alien life, but all life." His words echoed in the chamber. For a moment there was silence, but then laughter broke from one noble. "Fine words, human. But words do not change blood. You are not one of us. You never will be." Rami did not answer. He knew more words would only feed their anger. Instead, he bowed his head slightly toward the queen. But before she could speak, the doors of the chamber burst open. A soldier stumbled inside, his armor broken, his face pale with fear. He fell to one knee. "My queen," he gasped. "The rebels have returned. Their army is larger. They march on the palace now." The chamber filled with cries. Nobles stood, their voices clashing again. Some shouted to prepare the guards, others demanded retreat. Fear spread like fire. The queen stood tall, her hand raised high. "Silence!" The voices fell. She turned to the soldier. "How many?" "Thousands," he whispered. "They carry new weapons. The city walls may not hold." The queen's face was calm, but her eyes shone with steel. She looked at her council. "You speak of doubt. You speak of fear. Now is the time to prove your courage. Will you defend your city, or will you hide behind words?" No one answered. Many looked away. Rami stepped forward. His voice was firm. "Let me stand in the front line. Let me fight with your soldiers. If I fall, then you may say I was unworthy. But if I live, let that be my answer to your doubts." The chamber stirred. Whispers spread like wind. The queen's eyes locked on his. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded. "Very well. You will stand with us. And I will stand with you." The nobles gasped, but none dared speak against her. The decision was made. Soon the city shook with the sound of war drums. Horns called from the walls. Soldiers poured into the streets, their armor shining, their banners raised. Civilians fled to the inner chambers as the gates closed. Rami walked among the soldiers. Some looked at him with distrust, others with curiosity. Few spoke. But he did not need their words. He had chosen his path. The queen came to him, her armor bright silver, a long spear in her hand. She looked at him closely. "This is your chance, human. If you wish to prove yourself, do so here. If you fail, you will fall not only for yourself but for all trust placed in you." Rami met her gaze. "Then I will not fail." The horns sounded again. The gates shook as the rebel army came into view. Thousands of figures marched in black armor, their banners dark, their weapons glowing with strange light. At their head stood a tall figure with a red crown, his eyes burning with hate. He raised his hand, and his army roared. The queen raised her spear, and her people answered with their own cry. Rami stood at her side, his weapon gripped tight. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the storm broke. The rebels rushed forward, their weapons slamming against shields, their voices a thunder of rage. The palace walls shook, the ground trembled. Arrows flew, spears clashed, and the sound of war filled the sky. Rami fought with all his strength. His body burned with pain, but he did not stop. Every strike, every step, he held the line. Around him soldiers fell, but still he stood. At one point he saw the queen surrounded. 3 rebels rushed her at once. Without thought, Rami leapt forward, blocking one with his own body, striking the other with his blade. Pain shot through him as steel cut across his side, but he did not fall. The queen's spear flashed, swift and deadly. The rebels fell back, broken. She looked at Rami, her eyes wide for a moment, then fierce again. You fight as if this is your own home. It is, Rami said, his voice hard. For now, it is. The battle raged on, neither side giving ground. The rebels' new weapons tore through stone, their fury shaking the gates. Yet the queen's soldiers held, their will as strong as steel. As night fell, both sides bled, but neither claimed victory. The storm had returned, and it had not ended. Rami stood at the wall, his body torn but unbroken. The queen stood beside him, her spear raised high. Their eyes met, and though no words passed, both knew the truth. The real test had begun. The night sky glowed with pale blue light as the battle raged on. Smoke from fires curled into the air, and the sound of clashing steel echoed across the palace grounds. Rami's body ached, but he could not stop. The rebels pressed harder than ever, their weapons striking walls and shields with unrelenting force. The queen's voice rang out like thunder, commanding her soldiers with precision. Her spear flashed through the dark, moving faster than any eye could follow. Around her, soldiers pushed the enemy back, their courage bolstered by her presence. Rami fought beside her, every movement driven by determination. He blocked a strike meant for a young soldier, then spun and struck back at another rebel. Sparks flew from their clash, lighting the darkness like tiny stars. Each step was a struggle, each breath a battle, yet he refused to falter. From the main gate, the enemy leader raised his weapon, a staff glowing with dark energy. He shouted orders, and the rebels surged forward in a massive wave. Their strength was overwhelming, and the palace walls began to tremble under their assault. The queen saw the threat and called to Rami. We cannot hold them much longer. I need you now, human. Trust your strength. Rami nodded, understanding. Together, they pushed toward the front line. The rebels fell back at their approach, struck by the combined force of the queen's command and the human's courage. A massive figure broke through the soldiers near the queen. Rami moved faster than thought, intercepting the attack. He blocked the strike with his blade, feeling the vibration in his hands. The enemy pressed harder, swinging wildly. Rami stepped aside, using the momentum to strike the figure down. The queen's eyes widened for a moment, then returned to her calm focus. Good. Keep moving. Push them back. Rami did not speak. Words would slow him now. He moved through the battlefield, guiding soldiers, defending the queen, and striking with precision. His actions inspired those around him. Even the council members who had doubted him earlier began to follow his lead. The enemy leader roared and unleashed a wave of energy from his staff. The force shattered shields, sending soldiers flying. Rami saw the queen about to be struck. Without hesitation, he leapt forward, placing himself in the path. The energy hit his arm, knocking him to the ground. Pain shot through him, but he clenched his teeth and rose again. The queen's spear struck true, shattering the enemy leader's staff. He fell back, defeated but alive. The rebels' morale broke, and their formation collapsed. Soldiers turned and fled through the gates, pursued by the queen's warriors. Rami stood, breathing heavily, his body bruised and bleeding. The queen approached him, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. For the first time, there was no command in her voice, only acknowledgement. "You are remarkable," she said softly. "You risked your life not for glory, but for what is right. Few could do what you have done." Rami shook his head slightly, exhausted. "I only did what had to be done. You gave me a chance, and I could not turn away." The queen studied him for a long moment. Around them, the palace soldiers began to cheer, raising their weapons in victory. The nobles looked on in silence, some in disbelief, others in reluctant respect. "Your people must know what honor looks like," the queen said, her voice firm. "And perhaps humans are not what I believed. You have proven courage, loyalty, and strength beyond your kind's reputation." Rami lowered his head. "Thank you, my queen. I only wish for peace and safety, for both your world and mine." The queen's hand rose slowly, a gesture of command and recognition. "From this day, you are no longer a prisoner. You remain under my watch, but your actions have earned my trust. Others may doubt, but I see the truth in your heart." Rami felt a weight lift from his chest. For so long, he had feared judgment, feared failure, feared the end of his people. Now, standing before the alien queen who had once threatened his life, he understood something new. Courage and honor could bridge worlds. The council members approached slowly. Some bowed, acknowledging Rami's role in the victory. Others hesitated, but none spoke against the queen's decision. Her word was law, and she had chosen wisely. The queen turned to Rami once more. "Your people still need the crystals. If you wish to take them, I will allow it. But know this, you are welcome here, anytime. Perhaps one day your kind and mine can be allies rather than enemies." Rami bowed deeply. "I will return with what my colony needs. And I will remember your trust, always." For the first time, a faint smile touched the queen's lips. It was subtle, but genuine. "Then go, human. Let your actions speak as loudly as your courage." Rami left the palace with the soldiers guiding him to the storage of crystals. The rare stones shimmered in the moonlight, glowing with energy. He carefully collected what his colony needed, his hands steady despite exhaustion. As he prepared to leave, he looked back at the palace. The queen stood at the balcony, her silver robe glowing softly in the night. She raised her hand once more, a silent signal of farewell and hope. Rami felt a deep respect for her. She had spared him, tested him, and now trusted him. In her eyes, he saw the possibility of a new future where humans and aliens could stand together, not against one another. He returned to his ship and prepared for departure. As the engines hummed and the ship lifted off, he glanced back at the palace one last time. The alien queen remained there, a figure of strength and wisdom, watching him leave. Rami's heart was full of determination. He would bring the crystals to his colony. He would honor the trust given to him. And perhaps, one day, he would return to this world, not as a stranger, not as a prisoner, but as a friend and ally. The stars stretched out before him, endless and bright. His journey was not over, but a new chapter had begun. The human had faced danger, earned trust, and proven that courage could change hearts. And in the silence of the alien world, the queen whispered to herself, a quiet hope shining in her eyes. "Dare to return, human, for this world may yet need you." The ship disappeared into the sky, carrying not just crystals, but a promise of unity and hope between two very different peoples.